Hello and welcome to another episode of Smaulgld live streaming. Today is, better get the date right, June 15th, 2018, and let's just quickly review what happened in the precious metals today. Gold and silver took a beating. Gold down to $12.78, down $23 on the day. Silver took an even bigger hit, down to $16.54. The excuse that I heard for today's drubbing was the Trump tariffs that were announced earlier in the day. I'm not quite sure why that would have happened. We talked the other night about silver looked like it was outperforming gold for about 3 or 4 days. And I had mentioned that that happens every now and then it gets smacked down. And looks like we saw that happen once again, down to 16.54. And the gold-silver ratio shot back up to about 77.78 to 1. Bitcoin and Litecoin and the cryptocurrencies did somewhat of a rebound, follow through from yesterday, still way down off of their highs, about 60-70% off of their December, January highs. Today we have Phillip Kennedy, but before we get to Phillip of Kennedy Financial, he's going to be with us, I hope, for about an hour to talk about the Fed, the ECB, gold, silver, and whatever other questions you might have for him. I noticed from last night, we were talking about the IG report, and one of the things that I thought was an original insight that I had was listening to Comey and comparing it to the way I was reading the IG report and how Horowitz went through all of the bias examples in his 500 some odd pages and basically concluded there was no bias. So I think I said something like this last night. Did their job, and we're not going to second guess them. This made me feel it was almost just like with Comey's exoneration of Hillary Clinton. He went through the whole litany, and we're going to go through some of the bad stuff in the report. He went through everything Hillary Clinton had done wrong in that July 5th press release, saying that she had not turned over all the evidence. Joe, I got a question for you. If you can answer, then we know we're doing the right thing here. Joe, when I just played a clip, did you hear that clip? If not, I know what the issue is, and then we'll take care of it. Because I also want to make sure I'm going to get Phillip on the line. You didn't hear the clip. Okay. Anyway, just me. Good. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I'll get Phillip on the line. What I was talking about was how I thought that the IG report was very similar to Comey's litany of all the things Hillary had done wrong, and then he wasn't going to do anything. I heard President Trump make the exact same comment this morning from the White House lawn. He made the exact same comment. And also, I heard just scanning by YouTube, Lou Dobbs said the same thing. What was really funny, and I wanted to play the clips for you, was he also said, he goes, that's moronic. So in any event, what I thought was original insight wasn't, because a lot of people, it's pretty obvious, saw that the Inspector General's report, I think DeGeneva called it cognitive dissonance. He made the same point, although he didn't mention, you didn't compare it to Comey's press conference. He said he's talking the whole time about a bias, and then he's saying there is no bias. All right, well, thank you very much for that, Joe. Let's get started now. And of course, Phil didn't hear it either. Now the real trick is going to come when we try to bring Phil on the line and see if he is ready to go. So today we have the pleasure of having Phillip Kennedy of Kennedy Financial on the line. Mr. Kennedy, how are you doing?
Not bad, Lewis. Thanks for having me on. Hopefully Joe can hear me. Let's do a test.
If Joe can hear you, we're good to go. If not, what we're going to do is we're going to go offline and we're going to record the show and get it up for you guys later in the evening. So we're just waiting to hear if Joe has heard Mr. Kennedy or anybody. Sounds good, Phil.
Right.
All right,
excellent.
So we figured out the technology here. All right, so I'm glad now that we've got Mr. Kennedy on the line. We've had a very busy week, and what's the first thing that pops out for you today in the markets? Was it the Fed, the ECB, the dollar, gold, silver, what's happening with cryptos? What's striking you It's really hitting you over the head right now. All of the above.
For me, honestly, Lewis, it's gold. Out of nowhere, here it is. It gets smashed yet again. I've over the years just gotten in the habit of ignoring the price of gold and silver because it's been 7 long years now, and it's just become so painful. And I've said very candidly on my show that one of the biggest personal purchases of silver I made was in the 30s after it had come off 50. To me, it was still a buy then, and I've made
Buying the dip, were you?
yeah, I was buying the dip, but I guess I was trying to catch the falling knife. And I continued to buy all the way down, and I bought some in the teens. And I think you know my story. Once I really started to understand cryptocurrency in 2016 and the value that it brings, I've kind of shifted my attention over there. But as we say on my show, as JP Morgan said, money is gold and nothing else. It would be really imprudent, or a statement would be full of hubris to say, well, there's no need for gold and silver anymore because we have cryptocurrency. And I would steer clear from anybody like that. But what I continue to say is, if we have, every time I've bought gold and silver, I've needed to use, some form of currency. And now we have this new thing called cryptocurrency. But back to your original question, I mean, again, it's just gold and silver. Gold getting pounded by over $20, silver down 60 cents. And apparently for what? As your listener Joe here is writing, for the 15th consecutive time over the past 24 months, COMEX silver was immediately smashed the week following a close above its 200-week moving average. And that comes from Craig Hemke. It's just, it's in your face. Everything appears to be in your face, whether it's financial fraud or fiscal fraud or monetary fraud or political fraud. It's just so blatant. And, I would have thought this fraud would have come to an end because all frauds do. But that's, to me, the biggest topic of the day. Just out of nowhere, gold suddenly getting smashed by over $20. It's really just astounding.
Now, Philip, I know that you think, as some do, I'm on the fence on this one, that cryptocurrencies somehow could end the fraud. Explain how that might work.
Well, I think when I started looking at it as an accountant,
Mm-hmm.
the idea that you have this decentralized, immutable ledger that the whole world can see, that is like, I don't know how much of a family show that you've read here, but that's like an accountant's wet dream. The idea, I've conducted numerous audits myself. They're time consuming, they're tedious. And if you had something as transparent as Bitcoin, it's so evolutionary when you really start to think about some of the problems that it could solve. So that was really the launch point for me. Is if you just take the Mt. Gox hack, for example, there are so many smart people out there. You can go out and look at these graphics where they're able to map the wallets and the transfers from one wallet to another and how things were passed along. We don't know anything like that when it comes to gold and silver. You hear stories from Alistair McLeod about, well, there's this warehouse in London and there's a stripe down the middle and they kind of just shift pallets from one side to the other. And, you think to yourself, how accurate can that really be? How much gold is really mined per year? A lot of folks in our alternative finance camp talk about the fact that, well, yesterday over a year's mining supply in silver was sold in about 10 minutes, right? And so that's no way to have any kind of faith in an economic system or a monetary system. So I think that's really the problem that Bitcoin solves, is it's giving the world transparency into something. And sure, there are, I'm not 100% sold on Bitcoin. I would say I'm 100% sold on cryptocurrency, though. I think the cryptocurrency is going to solve problems that the world could never solve before. But we need this, and as great a track record as gold and silver have with money, even governments found a way to ruin that. And I know you've talked about it on your show. The cables from the 70s that have been discovered, and the agreement through phony paper contracts to suppress the price of gold and silver. If we ever really had a day where everyone came and asked for delivery at the same time, that's the only time we'd really know, how much gold is really out there. How much can they really cough up for the promises that have been made? So I think that's one of the things. The beauty of Bitcoin is, if someone was trying to sell 22 million Bitcoin, we could be rest assured that that's impossible, right? Because only 21 million will ever be mined, and it's going to take over 100 more years to get there.
What I've seen, though, which you don't need to sell that much Bitcoin in order to have an impact. And one of the things I haven't figured out, and maybe you can help me, is let's say they're guessing that Mt. Gox trustee is selling Bitcoin. And then I don't dump them all in the market at once, but they dump us, let's say, a substantial amount. Why then do all the other altcoins fall almost instantaneously and in fairly equal amounts? Even though we can see all this transparency, it's like watching it play out before your eyes, because why would a Litecoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, EOS all sell at the same time that the Mt. Gox trustee is selling?
That's something I've been trying to figure out myself. I almost think it's akin to, someone beating up the biggest guy on the playground and then everyone else just kind of backs off. But
instantaneously, and then also
right.
across all exchanges at the same time, because it's the average price that you see on CoinMarketCap, and you also see if you're just watching GDX, the Coinbase electronic trading platform. If there's a big drop in Bitcoin or a big boost, you see them, they work in tandem. And there's transparency, but it looks like, I think it looks like manipulation. It just doesn't make sense that they would all move in tandem and in big measure too.
Yeah, a lot of folks out in our camp say, hey, we've been through this before with gold and silver. It's not a coincidence that since late December, since the arrival of short contracts on the CME, that Bitcoin and its its other top 10 currencies have all been smashed. And I guess to that argument, I would say, well, look back at the history of Bitcoin, 2011, late 2013 into early 2014. It's been smashed before. I mean, I think the first time it was smashed like 90%. And then in 2014 onward, it fell as much as 80% after, the news of Mt. Gox. And now this most recent one is 70%. So I think I follow this guy on Twitter, Parabolic Trav, and he's of the opinion that we are going to continue to see parabolic moves throughout the lifetime of Bitcoin. I think those parabolic moves are reflective that we're getting a new financial system. I mean, I know you're familiar with Mike Maloney's work, and his argument is that the world gets a new financial system every 40 years. And I'm starting to kind of reach the conclusion that this is going to be our new financial system. It's going to be one based on a cryptocurrency, and we can continue to expect an enormous amount of volatility with that. I even joked back in, I guess it was December or January, late January, I guess, after Bitcoin was taking a dive, and guys like Peter Schiff and Jim Rickards were taking a victory lap. And, that's kind of like a buy signal for me, especially when, a bunch of things are happening on one day, like, Twitter's depressed and Peter's taking a victory lap and everything seems to be falling down around crypto. And I wrote to him, hey, Peter, I'm back from the future. The year is 2045. And you're still saying, how can Bitcoin be money when it just fell from $500,000 down to $250?
and the Fed can never raise interest rates. You're still saying that?
Right. Yeah. So I think people have been through this before. Max Kaiser jokes that when he told people to buy Bitcoin at $14 and it fell to $7, they were ready to come after him with pitchforks and torches. So, a lot of people have been through this a long time, but I think for folks that are still on the fence, really just go out there and educate yourself and figure out why there may be something to this. There's lots of materials out there now. It's all over YouTube. You can follow a channel like mine where we talk about this at least once a week. But there are a lot of advantages. I mean, think about it. If you're a poor Venezuelan and you've somehow managed to learn how to mine Bitcoin and you're doing it at way cheaper than any other person in the world can do it because your electricity is subsidized. I don't know if you saw that chart recently, but they say the average Bitcoin can be mined for like $530 in Venezuela. Now, sure, there's a lot of other factors that make it much more difficult than other countries, but my point is this is a way for poor people around the world to be able to get their hands on a store of wealth and take it with them. And maybe when they get to their destination, they decide to go on AppMex and buy a pallet of American Silver Eagles. Why not? No one's stopping them. But the idea that this is just a fad and it's going to go away and that it's one big bubble is sheer nonsense. And I think everybody, if you're in that camp, you need to pick a point. I do this with people in my life all the time, all sorts of relationships. The best example is my brother was dating a girl whose sister wanted to play in the London Symphony Orchestra. And the parents were, moved her over there, spending thousands and thousands of dollars, putting her up in a place. And, I'd follow up from time to time. And, I'd ask, well, how's it coming? And, well, she hasn't made it quite yet. Well, it turns out she'd been at it for like 10 years, So the question, I use that as an example. Everyone needs to come up with a deadline for themselves. Is it going to be when Bitcoin is $50,000 or $100,000 or when the coin market cap in total is $5 trillion, like the Winklevoss twins say? So, once it reaches that point, we all need to have a sense of humility. When silver fell down to $13, I needed to take a step back and say, there is something I don't understand here. It's hubris that gets in the way of a lot of financial decisions. And I think we've all made mistakes from time to time. But, to think that cryptocurrency is not here to stay might be a big mistake on the part of a lot of people out there.
Okay, so here's what I've been thinking as I watch this, and I'm fully aware that Bitcoin has gone up and it's gone down, skyrocketed, collapsed. And I'd look at it and I said, okay, well, it's probably the first evergreen bubble we've ever had. Normally, when a bubble collapses, you don't hear about the asset anymore. When the tulips,
right,
when they collapsed in 1642, whatever it was never another tulip bubble. Same with the South Sea, whatever the bubble is, internet bubble, it goes away because it was a mania, it was ridiculous, and it doesn't come back. Bitcoin has shown that it can go and come back. But what if this is the last time? I mean, is it possible that, sure, they're here to stay, but they're not going to be worth 8, 10, 20,000 a coin. They're going to be worth 50, 100, maybe less. I mean, is that possible? That, sure, maybe they don't go away, but people realize that they're not going to trade them because there is that risk involved. They don't want to lose 70, 80%. So they just stop buying them. We're seeing the volume somewhat dries up. Do you think that might happen, or do you think this is just round 13 of the up and then down?
I used to think that was a possibility, but I think Tone Vays made one of the best arguments that I've heard. I had him on my show, and he said, look, if a bunch of people are willing to put their wealth into something and hold it long term, then why would anyone else be willing to turn around and put their wealth into something else when they already saw the wealth evaporate in another cryptocurrency? That really started some mental stimulation on my part. And I think the other advantage that Bitcoin has is it caught everyone by surprise. I mean, you have to remember that this thing was still pretty worthless 2 years into its existence.
Right.
By 2011, it was still only trading for like a nickel or a quarter, something like that. And so it caught the world by surprise. It really is the only totally decentralized cryptocurrency out there. And that's why you end up with these maximalists like Tone Vays who say, hey, everything else is centralized in some form or another. But I think I don't know. I'm starting to reach the conclusion that this thing is going to be with us for a while. But I would go back to my previous statement that, hey, we do get a new financial system every 40 years. My notion on this is that it's twofold. I saw this documentary called Magic Money: The Bitcoin Revolution, and it's not a coincidence that some of the biggest manias for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency happen in South Korea and Asia in general. It just seems like they are on the cutting edge of this. They're using it in day-to-day transactions. I mean, you have people who, are entertainers, and they'll have their QR code there up on stage. And long before I began understanding cryptocurrency, I was already of the opinion that, wealth is moving from west to east because China makes everything, and many of the Asian countries haven't adopted, these welfare societies that we have here in the U.S. So those two things coupled, I think that's a strong, tailwind for Bitcoin. But also, if you talk to your average millennial, especially if they're in their 20s, they've already heard the stories from their parents about how they got burned in the market. The millennials themselves have been burned with, student loans, and they're delaying marriage, and they can't have kids, and they can't afford a house. And most of them are reporting that they feel more comfortable owning a basket of cryptocurrencies that they hold themselves than entrusting their wealth to some 401k or, Merrill Lynch or, one of these banks that got bailed out. So I just see a lot of things that are working in the favor for cryptocurrency long term and working against the legacy financial system that has been erected over the last 100 years since the creation of the Fed. It's not a coincidence that Charlie Munger uses a comparison to trading baby parts. These guys hate the idea that the system that made them extraordinarily wealthy is going to be upended. And I think they better get used to that, because I really think that's what we're really witnessing right before our eyes.
But don't you think that the people that are really attracted to Bitcoin cryptocurrencies, they're in it for the money? I don't know if they're thinking they're going to create a new financial system. They're worried that they're actually helping their financial position by buying cryptos. Aren't most of the people who came in over the last year speculating, and they buy it if it's going up, and then if it goes down, they decide, I don't need this. What good is it?
Yeah, no, you're right. I think there are a lot of weak hands, and one of the things that opponents to cryptocurrency say, one of the things they say that's accurate, is that more people have probably lost money in crypto than have made some. But I think that is the reason why they really need to think twice. When we had that run up between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I said this on my show, I was getting calls and emails like every day on, hey, how do I open up a Coinbase account? How do I get a hardware wallet? Which coins do you think I should buy? And I was like, hey, I'll tell you something honestly. And I put this on my Facebook page the morning of December 7th, because I got a call from my college buddy the night before asking me about Bitcoin. And this guy has never expressed an interest in anything finance related. And that, coupled with what I was seeing on Twitter and a bunch of things, I was like, I went on Facebook that morning and I said, I forbid you from buying Bitcoin today. And sure enough, I remember, because that's my birthday, that's when Bitcoin ran up from 14,000 to 18,000, and then it crashed a little bit for several days, and then before Christmas it pumped all the way to nearly 20. And I think that's what your audience needs to understand, is you want to be buying cryptocurrency when nobody's talking about it. And if you look at the Mayer multiple on Twitter, if you look at Google Trends, if you look at just the amount of pessimism out there, I've been retweeting some of these tweets, one guy talking about, well, I guess I need to renew my resume or whatever. And, just all the hopes and dreams that have been dashed But they're all ignoring the fact that, and I put this out this week, and maybe I can, once if I find the link, I'll put it here on the live stream. You know, as bad as things are, I used to have a basketball coach who talked about it. You know, as bad as we're playing, we're only down by 11 points at halftime. As bad as things seem, we're still up. This week, we were up at one point for coin market cap, up 200% from a year ago. So, yeah, sure, it's down a lot. It's down over 65% or whatever since the highs, but that was a mania. And there are going to be a lot of manias in Bitcoin, but it's sticking around. It's still strong. And I think, that's what people really need to understand. And that's why I share information like this on my channel. I'm a financial counselor by trade. I do pro bono financial counseling for people that are going through, bankruptcies, student loans, things like that. And I think that's what everybody needs to have in the back of their mind. If Bitcoin does have another huge run up, avoid that feeling of greed. That's when you need to be fearful. And then right now, maybe it's time to be a little greedy.
Well, I just want to say, I've noticed that Salivate Metal has joined us, and I think it's a great thing, and I want to extend a multitude of gratitude to him and all of his listeners. And I think it's really good to see the community come together on this day of what Phillip talked about when we started out, the smash down of gold and silver. And that actually does have a demoralizing effect, Phillip. But I think this recent smash down in Bitcoin and Litecoin and the rest was very public, and it happened right after they instituted the futures, which I believe can be used to manipulate this. And I want to get your take on this. We know that there are Bitcoin whales, right? We know that they're worth billions of dollars. And they're probably thinking they're not going to make a lot more money on, well, they might, but one way they can make money and get liquidity is they can now short Bitcoin on CBE, whatever, CBOE or the CME.
Right.
Then all they have to do is leak out a few of their shares to drive the price down. Then they collect their money on the contract on the short that they made, and then they take that money, they go long, and then they just buy some more Bitcoin on the exchanges, drive it up, collect their money on the long contract, and basically they have an incentive now not to have these massive run-ups in price, but basically to just run it up and down, run it up and keep it in a trading range. And because they control, I think 1% of the wallets control 90% of the Bitcoin, they can mess with it. And you don't know who they are. I mean, they could be government actors. But it's interesting that the SEC has said, and so has the CME group, and so has the CFTC, they're very interested in cleaning up these markets. When I say cleaning them up, they're bringing lawsuits to find out whether there's been manipulation in Bitcoin. I find that astounding. It's a minor asset. It hasn't been around very long. And you have blatant manipulation going on in gold and silver. They don't seem to care. They don't make announcements on it. It seems that they're ready to bring the banks and all of the big financial investors into Bitcoin, and they want to financialize this thing. And I think they also probably want to discourage people and dishearten them. And maybe this recent smashdown was exactly that. That's just speculation. But what do you think?
Yeah, I've thought about that too. Like, will they be able to keep it in a range? And what would that range be? I think that given the number of people that are coming online, big names, Tim Draper, you got Novogratz out there, and this is a worldwide thing too. I think that even the biggest players out there, if they're not careful, they eventually could get burned in a short. And if suddenly the market goes long, right, they're going to have to go along with it, which would just mean, the prices upward would get exacerbated in that direction. So I think because it is growing in popularity and it is so transparent that the shorts, they've been successful in, crashing the price all the way down from 20,000, but I wouldn't get too optimistic about their ability to continue to do that long term, because as I stated earlier, we've already seen massive fluctuations in the price of Bitcoin over its lifetime, and they were to the tune of 90% before and 80% before. And sure, it wasn't in the billions and billions of dollars like it is now, but I would imagine that a lot of these guys, in the back of their mind, they're thinking, okay, I need to be very careful because I could get burned, and this thing could pump suddenly from 6,000 all the way up to 10, and who knows where the top is. So it works both ways. And I think since it is so volatile, and it is so transparent, that they're not going to be as successful in the long run as they have been with gold and silver. I think the reason they're successful with gold and silver is for the reasons that Eric Sprott always states. Well, yesterday again they went and sold an annual mining supply of silver in 3 seconds, and they're just not going to be able to do that in this new asset known as Bitcoin. I don't see it, but I share your how you're baffled that every time Bitcoin is smashed, because I think the altcoins get smashed. I think that the ratios there are eventually going to get out of whack, and we're already starting to see it now with Dash. Dash is at like a 1 year low against Bitcoin, and I've already committed myself if Litecoin gets down to under 0.01, or like 0.5%, I'm going to start loading up there, because that appears to be the firm trading range. Anything from 0.06 all the way up to 0.025, or 0.006 up to 0.025. I feel like that's just going to end up backfiring on them, because they're going to allow smart people to take advantage of the imbalances. I know you've talked about the gold and silver ratio all the time. I think it's more important to look at the ratios in cryptocurrency, because when they get out of whack, people take advantage of them, and that's how you get your hands on more Bitcoin. And getting your hands on more Bitcoin allows you to get your hands on more altcoins, and then in the long run, you can get your hands on more Bitcoin. It's a cycle, and we're going to see how it plays out. It's only been a little over what are we at, 6 months now of futures contracts on Bitcoin. So,
and it's gone straight down since then.
Yeah, it's gone straight down, but it started off this epic pump at around these levels, and now we're bouncing off that level. We've tested this kind of like 5,500, 6,000 range. This is the third time. Is it going to hold? If I knew that, I wouldn't be on your show. I'd probably just be sitting on my yacht. But I think I'm optimistic. I do believe in math and statistics, and one of the tools Trace Mayer himself likes to use is the Mayer multiple that anybody can follow on Twitter. What is it? @tip Mayer multiple. And we're now like in an area where Bitcoin is usually relatively more valuable, like 95% of the time, against its 200-day moving average. So I've bought some recently. I bought some on Sunday when it got smashed, and I'll continue to do so. This is a long-term thing. If you think back to, like, if you got burned in 2013, 2014, you bought Bitcoin at $1,000, and you bought it all the way down to $190, and then you bought on the way up. You're probably doing a lot better than the average person who just has a 401k or something not even as good as that.
So when people buy cryptocurrencies, do you think they mostly leave them on the exchanges, or do you think that they buy themselves a Trezor or a Ledger or any of those hardware wallets? Because I've heard people, I think I had a comment the other night, I was talking about how I think people, the older they get, the more adamant they are and the more turned off by cryptocurrencies than the younger people. And one of the reasons they give is that it's somewhat of a nuisance to buy and to trade. I had another experience that somebody was telling me they had to load it on their Trezor, then they had to take it off their Trezor, put it on the exchange, try to sell it there, and then wait to get their cash. Do you think people are just trading on the exchanges? Do you think people are pulling them off the exchanges and trying to figure out all the firmwares and updates to the hardware wallets. What are the people that you know do when they buy cryptocurrency? They call you up and they say, "I'm going to buy cryptocurrency." Do they just go on Coinbase and leave it there, or do they try to do some type of hardware wallet solution?
I think most normies, anybody who's brand new to cryptocurrency, and I once was one. I was told by one of my guests who is retired at the age of 34. He's like, if you bought crypto before September 2017, then you're no longer a normie. So I've got that going for me. I'm no longer a normie, Lewis, because I started buying in late 2016. But I think when I started off, I had no idea what to do. So I started off small. I left it on the Coinbase, exchange. Then I discovered, hey, there's actually this thing called GDAX, which is like the back exchange to Coinbase. And if you transfer your coins there, you can trade them for much lower fees, and you can send them to your hardware wallet free of charge. And then I took that step, and then I finally got a Keep Key because I had Chris Coney on my show, and I was like, hey, what's a hardware wallet for dummies? And he's like, get a Keep Key. So I did, and sure enough, he was right. And that's really simple to use. I also have a Ledger Nano S that I've toyed around with, and that's not quite as easy. And in fact, I've even lost some Bitcoin playing around with that thing. And I had a few drinks before I did it, and I'll never do that again. Fortunately, it wasn't catastrophic, but it was a considerable amount of money at the time because it was in December. But I had made a ton of money too. So lesson learned. But I think that your average person is going to struggle. And that's why there's a tremendous opportunity out there. I guess there's this phone company, and I know your audience probably has heard of it in China. They're not allowed. These phones aren't allowed to be used in the U.S., but they are integrating Bitcoin wallets into their phones. And this is just how far ahead of the game. Like, imagine, Lewis, if my mother could go into a Verizon store, she bought a new iPhone, and she already had like $100 of Bitcoin prepaid on it, right? And your average American who's not familiar with crypto is just going to forget about it. But then over time, you're going to have vendors who are competing for this better currency, and they may say, "Hey, would you like to pay with Bitcoin today?" And she might look at her phone and suddenly realize, "Oh my gosh, it's $500. It's gone up." I've got more purchasing power. I've never had this before in my life because I've been a victim of the Federal Reserve my entire life and quantitative easing and artificially low interest rates. So your average person gets it. And that's what really needs to happen, though, in order to make it in order for us to see more adoption. And I know, Dash is trying to roll out their evolution platform so that if I were to send cryptocurrency to Lewis, I'm not sending it to an address. I'm sending it to a name, and there's a photo attached to it, right? And that's really some of the things that are going to have to be implemented, I think, to get your average person to use it. But
if I buy Bitcoin or Litecoin,
yeah,
why would I want to spend it? Don't I want it to go up?
Right. Yeah, you don't want to spend it.
Okay, so then what use is it? Because if you don't use it for its intended purpose, it's not like you can say, I'm going to buy gold or I'm going to buy a silver eagle, but I'm not going to cash it in. I'm not going to spend it, but I'm going to wear the necklace. I like looking at the 1914 quarter, whatever silver you might buy. But when you have Bitcoin or Litecoin, you're not using it. You're just holding on to it for its value. Where's it deriving its value if you're not going to use it and you can't enjoy holding it other than telling other people you're HODLing?
Well, on my Facebook page, I put out a link, and I've been saving up all these links. There's plenty of ways to spend cryptocurrency. Purse.com, BigCart,
sure.
Reed's Jeweler, places like that, right?
There's plenty of places, and it's easy as a merchant. I do business on the side with helping companies not set up Bitcoin, Litecoin ones, but I do content and websites for them. And I've set them up with, it's very easy to accept cryptocurrencies. It's just that no one goes into the store and wants to spend them.
Right. So, and that was the point that my friend on Facebook, I got up to 5,000 friends before I turned my back on Facebook and abandoned my account. But that was the point that he made. He took me to task and said, Phil, I guarantee you have not spent any of your cryptocurrency on that website. And my retort was, well, sure, why would I? I got worthless Federal Reserve notes for that. And isn't this just Gresham's law at play? I mean, I haven't given anyone my silver because I believe, that's going to be potentially 3 digits one day. And if it's not in my lifetime, I'll just give it to my kids because,
Well,
maybe it'll be worthwhile down the road.
but you
But
can't. But hold on, you can't spend your silver. You have to turn it into fiat. No, you can't go in with a roll of silver quarters. Well, you can, and they'll take them. They'll give you face value for them. But you can't spend your silver or gold, and they may have been minted. Look at the silver dollar, the silver eagle. It's worth $1. It says. Look at the 1 ounce gold coin. It says it's $50. You're not going to spend them for those amounts, but the cryptocurrencies you're supposed to spend.
right, no, well,
But they
I
don't.
I kind of consider them one and the same in terms of spending them. If I were going to spend my silver, I could easily take it down to a pawn shop and give them a mint case of Silver Eagles. And if they want to buy them, what are
Right.
they going for? Like 10 grand right now. So they fork over, $10,000, and then I go have a Merry Christmas or whatever. And,
But you,
it's even simpler.
but you're cashing them in. You're not spending them. You're cashing them in. You pay capital gains, and then you go take your 10 large and you go buy something. But
Well,
with
to me, I'm
Bitcoin, you
to
can
me, I'm
go.
spending them.
Well, you're realizing the value. But here's the thing: when you take Bitcoin, and people are saying, well, when it gets bigger adoption, that's when the price will go higher. But when you spend your Bitcoin, you're selling it. Why would a mass amount of selling of Bitcoin, people actually spending it, using it for its intended use, make the price go higher when it mean people are disgorging their Bitcoin and spending it? And then the question is, if you can buy something in a store, like you say, for worthless fiat dollars, why would you go out and buy Bitcoin so that you can then spend it?
Well, I think the kind of the epiphany I started to have with regard to cryptocurrency is like, what is the value of all the goods and services in the world, right? I mean, we've been messing around with these fiat currencies for a really long time, and they all eventually fail. What's going on in
But who know,
Italy and
but who knows
Argentina?
that? I mean, most people don't know that.
No, I'm saying I think what we're going to witness with getting this new financial system is a wealth transfer. And with that wealth transfer will come the desire to, you got your listener Jeff here saying, hey, his brother owns a restaurant. He's willing to accept cryptocurrency. He's willing to take that chance. I know that some folks in our alternative finance camp like to make the argument, well, a business owner can't take that risk. They have really thin margins, and if they sell this item, and suddenly, I mean, if you sold an item, if you sold a car for a $20,000 Bitcoin, and overnight you got ripped off, yeah, that's probably going to happen. But I think there will be people over time as it stabilizes who are
No, but
willing to take the
hold on.
risk.
But you can go. You don't even have to hold it. I mean, the way I've set it up for clients is they don't never see the bit. Some do. They can say, I'll take it if I want. But the payment processor, Coinbase, will convert it into fiat for you. So you never. So it's convenient if somebody wants to spend it, but no one's spending it, and it's convenient for the merchant because, especially when it was $20,000, you would think some people would say, look, I gotta cash in, maybe go into a coin store. All of the major coin bullion dealers online save one or two. Even Shift Gold takes cryptocurrencies.
Right.
And you just don't see a lot of that transaction happening, even in gold. Like you say, if people are interested in both cryptocurrencies and precious metals, they're going to spend their dollars to buy gold and silver. They're not going to go out and buy Bitcoin and then try to convert it for gold. So I'm just concerned that it's almost a catch-22. If they're saying that you need to have adoption and merchants accepting it and people using it, why would people use it if the reason they're holding it is for it to go higher? And then if they were to use it, it would drive the price down because it would mean people are selling it. It seems that we haven't had this massive adoption, but we've had this massive price increase. And maybe we don't want massive adoption if you want higher prices, because I think spending it and using it is selling it.
Yeah, sure. But I think you got stories of guys like this one guy who's been traveling the world because he made $25 million in Bitcoin. Everybody is going to reach the point at which they've gotten enough purchasing power for themselves, and there's no need to hold on to it. My Mrs. Kennedy wants to go to Ireland someday and France, and I keep telling her, hey, listen, well, why don't we wait a little while? Maybe we could use our Bitcoin purchasing power
Right.
on Expedia.com when we do that. And that's what I'm saying is when you really take a step back and you just think about all the goods and services in the world that are paid for with fiat currency that cannot be trusted, everywhere around the world, including right here in the United States, they cannot be trusted and they all fail every single time. What's the dollar worth? Like 3 cents of the amount it was back in 1913. They're all destined for failure. And in a world where you literally can't trust almost anything, here's something that's trustless, immutable, and decentralized. And it's like the biggest honey pot in the world. No one's been able to stop it. There's like 170,000 full nodes around the world. So there's 170,000 full copies of this ledger. It really is just mind-boggling how evolutionary this thing is going to be, and how relatively simple it is compared to some of the things that are being rolled out. I mean, like Bitcoin Cash coming out, and what is it, like 32 megabyte size blocks, and people are still like, nah, we'll just stick with this thing. It really is about these network effects. It's got such a head start. I mean, I use the example of Amazon.com. I imagine a lot of your listeners use Amazon. We have Prime in my house. And if someone were to say, hey, I've got a competitor to Amazon, you should check it out, I'd be like, that means I got to put my address in your website and my credit card information. You don't have this 20-year track record of delivering packages. And so I think that's really the beauty of Bitcoin. It caught the world by surprise. It's fully decentralized. A lot of people like Tone Vays and Trace Mayer have their wealth stored in it. And I think that, a lot of folks are underestimating what this means for the world. And I think that that's what we're seeing. We're starting to see Bitcoin do a calculation of the goods and services in the world, and the wealth transfer that's going to take place as a result of this is just going to be monumental.
Well, what I'm looking at, and I was a huge crypto skeptic early on, and some of those beliefs I still have. The thing that got me over the hump, not to dismiss it out of hand, was when India just decided they can call in their currency and basically the money you had in your wallet wasn't worth anything. So I realized, okay, so a fiat currency, an unbacked currency, an unbacked cryptocurrency, whatever it is, the big difference was that there is no Mr. Bitcoin who can say, I'm taking this away from you, I'm going to shut you off the grid, or we're just going to say Bitcoin that you have now isn't worth anything. So I like that. But one of the things I still struggle with is that most Bitcoin proponents will tell you, you've got to educate yourself, do research. And for most people, you don't tell people about this contraption that can bring light into your room and you have to connect wires and a light bulb works on. If you have to do research, electricity would never get anywhere. The reason electricity has gotten where it is people don't have to do anything. They turn the light on. So yes, we have now, you could put your money in a hardware wallet, but most people don't understand what that is. They say, where's my Bitcoin? It's not in the wallet. You just have your private keys. What is that? They don't understand that. Public key, private key. Now, so what I'm worried about, and also people think that you can hack Bitcoin. I see people, they're relatively smart on Twitter, they're saying that Bitcoin can be hacked and gold can't, and Bitcoin has third-party liability, third-party reliance, and it doesn't. It has it on the exchange, but that's no different than if you have your gold in a vault. You have third-party liability. So most people, the average, as you say, the normie, who hasn't done research and maybe fairly sophisticated financially, they look at it and they say, what is all this stuff? So people, yes, once you understand it, you read the white paper, you go through everything, you understand monetary policy, fiscal policy, inflation, limited supply. Yeah, once you get all that in your head, which less than 1% of the population will, yeah, then you say, well, this is a great thing. But I haven't seen where it's going to mainstream, and one would be in commercial applications. I was thinking that one way, Philip, that it would make sense for people to go out and get Bitcoin, not just in Venezuela, it's a good way in an inflationary environment, would be if the merchants were actually offering you discounts for using the Bitcoin to avoid the credit card fees. But to date, you don't see that. But that would be one thing where you would say, look, I don't have to worry that if I make a late payment on my credit card fee, that's one reason why people don't want to use credit cards. And then it's a credit score. And then on the other side, the merchant doesn't want to pay the fee. If Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, Dash, Litecoin, Monero, whatever it is, can come up with a way where you're incentivized to spend it, then you'd not just be incentivized to spend it and drive the price down. You'd be incentivized to go out and get yourself some, which would create demand and you drive the price up. Is that? Well, I mean, otherwise I just see it as if people spend it.
I got the perfect clip that I can play, and if you'll allow me, Louis, can I play it from 1994? And let's see if this works. It works on my show. If you don't hear anything within about 3 seconds, you and your audience should say something. Let's hit play.
And I'm going to raise my hand and say I didn't hear anything.
Do you hear it?
Nope.
Oh, darn. Okay. Well, so it's this clip that I'm sure a lot of your audience has seen. It's from 1994 on the Today Show.
Yeah. What is internet? Right.
Yeah. Exactly. What is internet? And you look at a lot of these young people. They probably never read a newspaper, right? There's no need to, because they've had a smartphone since they were in middle school.
Right.
And it's going to be far easier for them to accept this notion that their money is in their phone than it will be for my mom and my grandmother, right? They're a lost cause. And that's okay. My great grandparents never really got the hang of email, and that's okay too. But what really matters is that for the generation that's going to use it, they're going to adopt it naturally. And they're already doing that. I mean, I think that's why it's so fun to get on crypto Twitter and see these young guys in their 20s who understand how to use crypto. They understand hardware wallets. They understand, the technology in terms of sending it back and forth to themselves. What these guys have no clue about is financial markets and when things turn into a bubble, and how that's a sign that maybe you should be moving to the sidelines and things like that. That's where they tend to err. But I think in terms of how they're going to use it in the decades ahead, they've got that totally figured out, and that's really the only thing that matters.
Well, I don't think the average person will ever develop any real financial acumen, because they don't have to have financial acumen to use dollars or to use credit cards. So I don't think that's a downside to cryptocurrencies. They just have to be incentivized to use them, because I think you're only going to get a small amount of people who want them, either for the speculative reasons or because they get it and they understand everything. That's not going to happen. Now, Jeffrey mentioned that Lightning networks. Now, that is potentially a very big deal. You want to discuss how that works with the taking things off chain and then spending and then recording it on chain. Do you see that as one of the potential ways of getting crypto to be mainstream, getting more people involved in setting up nodes, or do you think that that's just? I think it's still, I've tried to do it. It still looks a little bit complicated. What do you think about the Lightning Network potential for Bitcoin, Litecoin?
I haven't even messed around with it. Frankly, this is one of those areas where it's outside my bailiwick, and I just trust smart people. I think I don't bring a lot to the table in this world always, Lewis, but one of my strong suits growing up was I could always identify some of the smartest kids in the class right off the bat, and I would just kind of take the lead from them.
And you know who to
And
cheat off of, is that it?
yeah, exactly. And I think some of the smartest guys out there right now, Jameson Lopp is one of them. I follow him on Twitter, and Andreas Antonopoulos. These guys are really excited about Lightning Network. For me, I don't, dabble in it because I don't understand it. Just like I've got a friend who's, far more well versed when it comes to doing some of these airdrops, and hey, you got to make sure you get your EOS on your Ledger Nano S so you can get this airdrop today. And I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to mess around with all that because I know I'm going to make a mistake, and I know I can go on YouTube, and Omar from the Crypto Show can show me how to do it step by step. But that's not me. I'm just going to stick to the basics so that I don't make another half Bitcoin mistake or whatever.
So,
but yeah.
Okay, so here's my question before we wrap up. Now, we started out talking about, I asked you what really struck you that happened today, and you mentioned gold. And then we've been having a freewheeling conversation, and mostly it's been about cryptocurrency. Are you as excited about the prospects of gold and silver as you are about the prospects of cryptocurrencies?
So I'll answer that with another example. So that 34-year-old retired millionaire who I had on my show, who came on, he was very candid about how lucky he was because he understood computer science, he hated the Fed, and it was right place, right time. But he said, I still love gold, Phil. I think gold and crypto are complementary to one another. And I really started thinking about what he said, and he's right, because I can't stress enough to your listeners who I know maybe I haven't convinced right now. Maybe Joe's one of them. Every time Joe has ever bought gold and silver, he's had to use a currency to do it. Why not use an ever appreciating currency that you can buy gold and silver with when it's had a big pump, and then turn around and maybe it's fallen and you can sell some of your gold and silver and buy this currency again, and just cycle like that. I just think they're mutually beneficial. And I think crypto brings something to gold and silver that we've never had before, which is an accounting information system. We don't know how much, you hear these terms tossed around all the time: hypothecated, rehypothecated, paper shorts. And, the average person out there is clueless about any of this stuff. They just know, well, why would I want to buy gold and silver? Dave Ramsey told me it's a terrible investment. And sure, look, it fell nearly 50% since 2011. I think this is an accounting information system that eventually is going to hold the powers that be accountable. And every time you need to buy gold and silver, you can use this alternative currency. I've done it myself. I bought silver at goldmoney.com. I'll be honest with you, I didn't really like the rate, the fees. I can do it cheaper myself. There's, you can go to AppMex now. Let's see here. I got it right here on my Google. What else? What other sites will let you buy gold? And so there's a bunch. There's a bunch out there.
Oh, well, they all will. JM Bullion, SD Bullion doesn't, but the other ones do.
Right.
But
so why not?
But the question I asked was, are you more excited about gold and silver or cryptocurrencies? And it sounds like if cryptocurrencies didn't come along, you wouldn't be excited about gold and silver.
No, I'd still be excited about gold and silver because my firm belief, again, I come at this from the mindset of a forensic accountant and fraud examiner. All frauds indeed end. Believe it or not, I didn't tell you this. I got a response from Dennis Neal 2 days ago on Twitter.
Who's Dennis Neal?
He is a former CNBC reporter, and I think maybe now he's on Fox Business or something like that.
He's not the Brian Kelly guy. Pumps. I don't know how he gets away with it. He goes on there and he pumps cryptocurrencies whenever he's on the show, and he runs a crypto firm. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I know. You'd think the regulators would be coming after him. I think somehow CNBC folks get a pass. But Dennis Neal, he put out something about, It was actually in response to the aforementioned Peter Schiff, talking about the Fed and the decision they made. And, Peter, you've been talking about this forever. And I know you and I were going back and forth on Twitter a little bit too, in a friendly way. But my main thesis is all frauds come to an end, whether it was the original Ponzi scheme or the most recent one everyone can remember, Bernie Madoff. But if you were Harry Markopolos, who went to the SEC in 2000 and you said, hey, I've run the numbers and Bernie Madoff is running a Ponzi scheme. And then you went to him again in 2004 and 2005 or 2007. If you were Harry's wife or his friend, eventually you'd be like, hey, man, knock it off. You've been talking about this thing every day and it's how it's a big fraud, a big scam. And, it's obviously not because you've been wrong for so long. And finally, by 2008, you had to wait for Bernie himself to admit it. And then you look at the aftermath of that admission. You look at all the lives that were ruined, who got embroiled. You look at the fact that not one, but both of his sons have died since then. Now he's serving a 150, 200-year prison sentence. And so in the short run, everything looked fine, but in the long run, the consequences were devastating. And so I compare that to gold and silver. We are suffering from a fraud in the gold and silver markets. It will come to an end. The resolution will be devastating. I mean, all that purchasing power is going to flow into gold and silver, and a lot of people are going to be defrauded who thought they held gold through phony paper contracts. But it all is going to play out the same. And sure, it's been a really long time, but I'm convinced that the truth will prevail, and so even if it weren't for crypto, I'd still be excited about gold and silver.
And do you think? I mean, no one knows, but I actually don't share that all frauds come to an end. I think they might, but they may be after your lifetime. There are people who lived in the fraudulent Soviet Union their whole life, and they never saw the end of it. And I think they introduced the COMEX, the futures trading, just when they legalized physical ownership of gold in 1974, at the end of 1974. Before that, it was illegal to own it. So they basically have kept market forces, physical supply and demand away from gold for almost 50 years now. And I'm starting to think that as long as there's that structure in place, that it's not going to skyrocket because they won't let it, because they have the ability to set the price on the COMEX. And then people talk about China. No one has anybody who has an interest in accumulating gold has no interest in having it go higher. So I'm very skeptical, not skeptical, but just pessimistic that we're going to see anything. And every day that they do something like they did today, for no reason, silver's looks like it's going up and it hits that moving average, and then bam, it goes straight down. And they do it with ease, and they do it, as you say, in your face. And what is the impetus for the fraud to end when so many people are making money from the fraud? You see, if people were losing money from the fraud, you might have a point, but I think people just throw their hands up, they sell, and they go on.
Yeah, no, I see your point. I just think that when you look at that debt clock on usdebtclock.org or whatever it is, and you see the rate at which those numbers are increasing, eventually there will come a day where maybe it will be cryptocurrency. If some of these guys are right, what was it? Novogratz came out and said he thinks crypto is going to go to a $40 trillion market cap in the next 10 years or something like that.
Well, why did he shut his fund down? I mean, he was going to do a fund, and then he decided not to do it right at the peak.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. But I was just using him as an example to say, let's just say he's right. We're not going to just have a couple, but like a bunch of brand new Warren Buffetts out there, if that's the case. And I think that's when the rubber will meet the road. I mean, it wouldn't be hard for several of them to get together and just, call the COMEX's bluff. But, you may be right on this, Lewis. Maybe it can go on forever. I don't know. Maybe, I mean, forever only matters, in our lifetimes.
Well, Eric Sprott made a very interesting point, because someone raised the question to him. They said, look, why doesn't somebody do that? Well, first of all, someone did do. Well, someone didn't do that. The Hunt brothers saw what can happen when they don't want
Right.
you driving the price. They basically, with the COMEX did, for people who haven't seen his story, once they got to the point where they were driving the price up, they were cornering the market. They were buying as much physical silver as they could. And then stupidly on margin, they were buying more contracts. The price was going higher. And then all of a sudden, COMEX decides all you can do now on COMEX is sell. Well, that price went down. That meant that they owed margin. They paid, and it basically shut them down. But it also discouraged people from entering into the silver market again. The price went down and stayed down. And that manipulation occurred at the level of the people with the badges. And that's a real disgrace. And it actually just made people, silver go away. So someone had asked Sprott maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. I'll never forget it. And he said, why doesn't somebody like a billionaire just go ahead and buy all the contracts and then stand for delivery? And he said, I'm not that stupid. I'm not going to lose all my money. I mean, because basically the rules of the exchange won't allow you to do anything that's going to cause the exchange harm. They'll toss you off the platform. That you'll basically be making a chaotic stand because you probably even lose your money. Then they investigate you for tax fraud and everything. So it isn't possible to go there and take down the COMEX because they won't allow it. That's like a government protected entity. So I don't hold any hope that anyone is going to try that because even if they did try it, they're not going to get away with it. And people say, well, it exposed the fraud. The fraud everybody already knows about. The traders know what they're doing. They don't want the gold or silver. They want the fiat profit. They're there as professional traders. They run funds that are run by that they get their bonuses paid in fiat. The fund has fiat in it, and they don't necessarily want to take the delivery. And it's not just with gold and silver. They do it with all the commodities. They don't want pork bellies delivered to their front door and dumped on their lawn. So I mean that's how those markets work. So I don't think that that's going to be what's going to happen. Is someday someone's going to break the COMEX because so what has to happen is people have to value the gold or the silver for themselves. And I think silver probably has a better chance of breaking out is if there is some type of must-have industrial demand that picks up a large amount of silver at the same time. And I thought we were getting close in 2015 when investment demand started to peak with 47 million silver eagles being sold, Canadian maple leafs. The investment demand used to be 5% of silver, and it jumped up to almost 25%, and you had a lot of solar demand. I think that would be something that could possibly happen. But so far, what's happened recently is the silver demand has collapsed 70, 80% on the investment side. So you get your hopes up, and then you see, yeah, it can't go on forever, and you keep telling yourself that. But then I start to think to myself, what else has a better chance where you don't have to tell yourself you have to wait and wait and wait and wait? Maybe you can pick up some money somewhere else along the way. And I think that's probably where I've been the last few years. Not that I'm against gold and silver, but I just see that whatever inherent value they have, a lot of it's been removed. Well,
Right.
you can't remove inherent value. But what I mean is they remove the fiat value. And after all, you do want to have fiat to be rich. In other words, you want the silver price to go to $100. You want the gold price to go to $5,000 so that you have more fiat to spend on things like houses and cars and whatever else you spend your money on.
Right. Yeah, no, that's obviously the hope. I mean, it's supposed to be insurance. And sometimes it's not just insurance, but it's the beneficiary of a wealth transfer that comes along with stupid decisions made by, the powers that be, whether they're in Washington or, other foolish places around the world.
Yes, that's definitely
But
true. The thing about gold and silver are people say they don't pay dividends. Well, they also don't default. They also are insurance against, say, well, a company can rise in value. Yeah, you can also have corrupt people running the company and go to zero. So I definitely believe in gold and silver as insurance, but I don't believe them in as assets that are going to skyrocket and somehow, make you rich. I think they're better viewed as anchors rather than rocket fuel.
Yeah. No, me too. But I think we just gotta remember, like my Bernie Madoff analogy. It was 8 long years for Harry Markopolos, and this has been a long bear market for gold and silver, but they still didn't manage to get gold under $1,000, and it hasn't even been 8 years in terms of this bear market.
Well, gold has held up. I mean, silver's down 40-50% against gold over the last few years. I mean, gold has actually done exactly what it should do, is hold its value. Silver's been a bit more speculative and has taken a beating. And I saw Joe mention he's waiting for the gold-silver ratio to go and then to swap into gold. I think a lot of people learn their lesson with silver is that silver has these spike and dive characteristics, and when it goes up faster, but hasn't seemed in the last couple hundred years to hold any type of price appreciation the way gold does. And it seems to come straight back down. And we saw it again even today when both gold and silver went down. Silver went down twice as much on a percentage basis.
Right. I'd love to see you have on, maybe spur a little debate, is David Morgan. I bet you two could find a few things to disagree on.
Well, no, we chat on Skype and offline. Actually, we don't disagree. I think he's well aware, and that's why he's getting involved in some of these side projects with cryptocurrencies. And I don't even understand some of the coins that he's working on. But the issue for David is that he has become the silver guru. So you almost have to promote silver, and you almost have to always be positive on silver.
Right.
And that's the same problem you have. That's why Amazon didn't call themselves Bookazon, because then they'd be stuck selling books the whole time, and they couldn't change. No, I mean you can become a silver guru, which he's done. He's written a Silver Manifesto, and but you can't be negative on silver, and he's not. But I don't think that silver is the answer. I don't think anything is the answer. I think having your wits about you is the answer. I think too many people put their faith in assets and start to get religious about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I could just say, one thing, I imagine we'll wrap it up. If you are a gold bug and you've been apprehensive about dabbling in the crypto markets, I will say you got one thing in your favor. You are the original hodler. You already understand how to hold on for dear life.
Right.
And that's definitely a trait that will come in handy. There is so much dumb money in the crypto markets. I mean, if you're on Reddit, 4chan, Twitter, some of these Facebook groups, and I went to head, and somebody invited me into one of these groups, and it was basically like a Ripple pump group.
Right.
And I had bought a little bit just for fun. And then I was looking at like the Ripple Bitcoin ratio in early January, and I was like, hey guys, based on this ratio and your like tireless enthusiasm, I sold 100% of my Ripple position, and they just went after me like, oh, look at this guy, he's stupid, that he doesn't realize it's about to be added to Coinbase and it's going to $10, and how foolish is he? And then the next day it went up like another 30%, and they were making fun of me again. But then look at what's happened since then. Everybody can go to CoinMarketCap and check it out. It's just been a disaster. And honestly, a lot of people in the crypto markets are saying, why is Ripple even on there? I mean, you can go online and find a picture of Ben Bernanke at that swell Ripple conference. It's like, hey, funny how he managed to make time for that, but he didn't show up to consensus.
That's the closest thing to FedCoin, isn't it? And it's a centralized issue.
Yeah.
It's not. You're right. Why should it even be on there?
Yeah, and they get like these rather attractive women on Twitter pumping it, like, oh, this is the future, and these young naive people eat it up, and that's why there's room for us out there, Lewis, is try to give people honest information, unvarnished, and there's a tremendous need for it out there right now. And if and I know that your audience is more educated than most of the people out there on YouTube, use this to your advantage. The fact that a lot of people have been, quote, wrecked, right? REKT. The sentiment out there is as bad as ever. And I think there's some weak hands. I was talking about the Bitcoin price, kind of how it had that massive pump and it was a speculative mania. But if you go back, and I'm pulling up the chart now, one of the, I think, best principles of crypto is to just buy at pre-pump prices. And the pre-pump price of Bitcoin on November 12th was a Sunday was $6,100. So,
So you
take that.
fully expect that we're just going to be off to the races again. The past is
No, we might have a 2-year bear market.
okay.
Yeah,
But it's not going away. So what you're saying is recovery in Bitcoin is inevitable, and the end of the fraud and gold and silver manipulation is inevitable too. Is what you're saying.
I would say
Is that correct characterization?
I would say the fraud in gold and silver will ultimately end, hopefully in our lifetimes, and that cryptocurrency is not going away.
All right.
I'm very careful there.
Oh.
I want to say Bitcoin, but that wouldn't be prudent.
All right. Well,
as George Bush used to say.
It wouldn't be prudent. 1,000 points of light. All right. Well, we're going to leave it there. Philip, thank you very much for joining me today, and thank you, Salivate Metal, for joining us also on the live stream. Multitude of gratitude to you all. I really appreciate it. And where can people find you, Mr. Kennedy?
They can find me at phillip.kennedy.com. They can get my free ebook there, Financial Judo. Just give me your email address and you can download my free ebook. And they can also find me on YouTube by searching for Phillip Kennedy Finance. And my channel will pop right up. Be sure to subscribe. And we do live episodes each week, just like Lewis. So tune in.
All right. And I just also want to pump one other thing for you. You also have started a new venture. You want to tell us about that?
Oh, gosh. Was it Patreon? Is that what you're alluding to?
No. Your association with our friend Jason Barak over at Wall Street for Main Street.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yep. That too. So that's going to be more on a monthly basis.
Okay.
I'm gonna join Jason on Welcome to Dystopia, and he's a macroeconomic guru. He understands things like currency swaps and just all these sophisticated macro things. And I'm more of a micro guy by doing pro bono personal finance. I kind of see things on the ground, what people are dealing with. So I think it's going to be a good marriage there in terms of bringing both those skill sets together.
Well,
so they can check me out there.
I thought that was a great first show that you guys did. I appreciate your work, Jason's work, and I appreciate everybody for joining tonight. And thank you very much, Mr. Kennedy. We're going to sign off now. Have a good night.
All right. Thank you.